Now, let's get started. So welcome to our Cats in the Corner office, our online speaker series featuring highly accomplished University of Arizona alumni. I'm Melinda Burke, president of the Alumni Association, and I'm very pleased today to introduce to you Steve Kerr. Steve has a 28-year experience in the NBA as a player, coach, analyst, and front office executive, including a 3-year tenure as general manager for the Phoenix Suns. Now entering his 3rd season as head coach of NBA's Golden State Warriors, Steve engineered the most successful campaign of any first-year coach in NBA history during the 2014-15 season, culminating in the Warriors winning the 4th NBA championship in franchise history and the first in 40 years. Having made the playoffs 11 times during his playing career, Coach Kerr is one of only 26 players in NBA history to win 5 championships, earning 3 rings with Chicago and 2 with San Antonio. He was originally selected by the Phoenix Suns in the 1988 NBA draft out of the University of Arizona. He capped his collegiate career here as a senior in 1988 by helping the Wildcats to their first Final Four appearance. An all Pac-10 guard in both 86 and 88, he remains the U of A's career leader in three-point field goal percentage. So please join me in welcoming our Cat in the Corner office, Steve Kerr. So welcome, Steve. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, good to be here.
Yes, well, we appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to hearing more about your experience both at the U of A and professionally. So let's start with your experience at the U of A. Could you start by telling us a little bit about that time in your life and how it prepared you for your career?
Sure. I never could have imagined when I first set foot on campus that all this would happen. But I literally went to U of A sight unseen. I didn't even take a recruiting visit. It was kind of a last second offer from Lute Olson. And I'll never forget arriving on campus with about 5 bags. And I had to take the Arizona stagecoach from the airport to McHale Center. And the coaches weren't allowed to meet me at the airport because of the the NCAA rules. And so I showed up. I didn't know anything about the school. I just knew that it seemed like a neat place, and Coach Olson was a phenomenal coach, and I knew I was very lucky to be there. But I never could have predicted that all this would happen.
Isn't that's terrific. Is there anything that you got out of the U of A experience that you didn't expect? The one thing I knew I would get was a great education, both academically and from Coach Olson, just being a part of the basketball program. I really wasn't a very good player when I arrived. I was hoping that I'd be good enough to get some playing time at some point in my career and work my way up into the lineup. But I didn't really have many expectations beyond. I knew I was in a place where I could do what I wanted, what I loved to do, which was to play basketball in a neat environment, a beautiful campus, and a lot of great people around me. So it just felt right. It felt like a great next step for my life. But really, I had no idea where it would take me. And your experience as a Division I athlete, I mean, is there anything there that you share with other athletes that you meet as they talk to you about wanting to have that kind of an opportunity in Division I athletics?
Well, I have 2 kids who have both been student athletes in the NCAA. My oldest son, Nick, was a basketball player at University of San Diego. My daughter, Maddie, is currently a senior volleyball player at Cal. And they have gotten the full student athlete experience. And that's really what you hope for it to be. And obviously everybody's got, a different life and different agendas. You've got kids coming into school for 1 year and then going off to the NBA draft, and that's fine. That's, every bit there, right? But for the vast majority of student athletes, they're not going to play professionally. And so when they can come in and compete in their sport, get their education, and understand that the sport is part of their education. It's their daily environment. It's who they're around, who they're learning from, teammates, becoming friends for life. This is all part of the university experience. And I think the thing that sticks out the most to me is that from our 1988 team, That's a long time ago. Those are all my best friends to this day. And the experience that we all shared together was just incredible.
That's great. So we have a question from Robert, who's the class of '86, and he says, is there a single event or a series of events from your time at the U of A that most impacted the trajectory of your professional career?
I don't know if it's a single event, but I think it's a single season. 1988, we made the Final Four for the first time in Arizona history. It was a spectacular season, and it was one that almost didn't happen for me. It was sort of a blessing in disguise, but I had a knee injury the year before that kept me out of what would have been my senior season in 1987. And so I redshirted and stuck around for a fifth year. And our team was so much better in 1988 than we would have been in 97 or in 87. And so I was able to play on this great team that received all kinds of recognition and notoriety. And I think that team helped me be recognized and helped me get drafted into the NBA and gave me my chance at professional basketball. I'm not sure it would have happened if I had left school in 87. Yeah. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, I guess.
Well, that's interesting. In fact, here's a question from John here in Tucson who says, what were your alternate career plans if the basketball thing hadn't worked out?
I was going to stay in basketball regardless, Melinda. I knew I loved the sport. It was where I felt the most comfortable. To be honest, I really felt like I was going to coach with Coach Olson at the U of A. I figured I didn't think I'd play in the NBA. I knew I wanted to stay involved in coaching. I probably would have become a graduate assistant coach for Coach O, gotten my master's, and just tried to forge a career at the collegiate level. And maybe when an opening came on the staff with Coach Olson, that I would have joined him. And maybe my career would have taken on a totally different path. But it all worked out beautifully, obviously, to play in the NBA for as long as I did on some great teams with Hall of Fame players and coaches. It really prepared me for the position I'm in now, where I'm coaching in the NBA with a great team. So I've really been blessed.
That's awesome. So we talk a lot about how important it is to have a mentor as you're building your career, and I'd say you probably had one of the very best. Could you talk a little bit about that experience of Lute Olson's impact, not just professionally but personally?
Yeah, well, Coach Olson was such a dynamic leader. We were so lucky to have him. The younger U of A folks won't remember this, but in '83, when Coach Olson arrived, the program was in shambles. The team had finished 4-24 the season before, one of the worst records in the country. And he literally built the program from the ground up. But to be there from the beginning, from day one, when we were trying to build the thing, was fascinating. And I didn't really think of it at the time, but I was only 17 years old. But Lute was so dynamic, so charismatic, so strong-willed. And we had these marathon practices, 3 hours, just absolute grind. And he set the tone right away. You had to work. You had to have some fun. You had to be part of the team. You had to commit yourself to one another. And he created this family. And he did that by having us up to his house for meals on holidays. And he and his wife, Bobby, would just treat us like their own kids. And it was really interesting to see the dynamics at work. You had this coach who was so strong-willed and powerful and even intimidating, but at the same time, he was like a father figure for a lot of us. And so I think what I learned from him was just how to build something from scratch, but more importantly, how to build those relationships within a team that really allow for the team to grow. And that's what happened with us over 5 years. That team went from 4-24 to the Final Four. So pretty remarkable.
It is remarkable.
Rise.
That's great. So you think about talent versus relationships. You talk about the importance of building those relationships. And if you think about building a career, having that network, how would you compare that to just having the raw talent?
Well, I think we all go into a field that, we're comfortable with, that we enjoy. I know, basketball was the thing that just made me the most happy growing up. And so I didn't really think too much about, how I would coach, how would talent translate to winning, all that stuff. I think, for me as a coach, I sort of learned from every coach that I've had. And you learn quickly as a basketball coach, you need talent. You've got to have talent. But it's how that talent develops within the team and even within the coaching staff, and how all those relationships fit together. But if you've got good players and they're committed and you can give them a good vision for what you want your team to look like, then you got a chance to have great success.
That's great. We have a question from John, class of 2005, who's asking, what qualities should people be looking for in their leadership of their bosses that you found in yours, or that you try to demonstrate for your own team?
I think, the best coaches that I had, the ones who really made an impact on me, Lute Olson, Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, they had this wonderful balance that I think is important for leaders in any field. And it's a balance of, on the one hand, that person is in charge. You're the leader, you're in charge. You got to know your stuff. You've got to lay out a vision, and you've got to get people to see that vision. But on the other hand, you've got to be compassionate. You've got to get to know the people who are playing for you or learning from you. They need to know that you care about them. You can't be the old school, my way or the highway these days. I don't think. I think you've got to get to know people on a personal level. You got to develop a relationship. And I mentioned Phil Jackson, Popovich, Coach Olson. They all had that balance. You were a little bit afraid of them. They were a little intimidating, but you had so much respect for them because of their knowledge. And then you gravitated towards them because they cared about you. They genuinely cared about your well-being. And I think that's a really important balance for anybody in a leadership position.
So you must have a favorite Coach Olson story that you can share. Is there one you'd like to share?
Oh, there's lots. Coach Olson he was super competitive. And I remember my freshman year, his first year, we had a team softball game, and it was freshmen and coaches against the rest of the team. And Coach Olson got up to the plate, and he was a good athlete, and hit the ball into the outfield and was like flying around the bases. And between second and third, he just took a dive. His legs got caught together. He tripped. He fell flat on his face. We're all brand new there. We don't want to laugh. This guy's our head coach. We're marveling at his competitiveness. I mean, it's a softball game, and he's flying around the bases. But it was about a month into our relationship, and everybody sort of looked at each other like, man, this guy really cares. It's a softball game, and he's lying in the dirt right now. But I loved what that represented, just how competitive he was, how he wanted to compete and have fun with us. And a couple of years later, we would have laughed once we knew him better, but we couldn't laugh at the time. We all just sort of stood there like, oh, this is awkward.
That's great. Well, I know we've got lots of questions coming in. Here's a question from John. This has to do with leadership. So let's move a little bit from the U of A into your experience and your beliefs and behaviors as a leader. At an Aspen Institute Sports Leadership Conference a few summers ago, Jeff Van Gundy told you to write down everything you learned and everything you want to do. How much have you written down so far, and has this helped you develop your philosophy of leadership?
Yeah, that was one of the best things that I did prior to becoming a coach. I've been friends with Jeff for a long time. He coached when I was playing. So we competed against each other. Always admired him. And we were at that conference together, and I just asked him, I said, how can I prepare to become a coach? I was doing television at the time. I said, how can I become a coach? What would you recommend? And he said, take all of your thoughts and ideas that you have right now and put them on paper and sort of formulate it. Really crystallize your thoughts and your beliefs. How would you run a team? What would the environment be day to day? How would you coach? And he said, that'll do two things. Number one, it will help you really get your thoughts together. But number two, now you have a document to put in front of a potential employer. You're going to interview for coaching jobs. You don't want to show up empty-handed. You want them to know you've thought about this. And it was the best advice I got before I became a coach. I have the document. I presented it to our ownership when I interviewed for the job. I think it helped me get the job. It's also something that I look back on, so that I have this reminder of how we wanted things to look and how they've turned out. And but it was as I said, a great way to kind of organize my thoughts and get rolling.
Great advice. That would work for a lot of different roles, I would guess. Anybody that's got a vision, writing it down and holding yourself accountable.
I agree.
Yeah, that's
I
great.
agree. Yeah, you no matter what you do, if you have a goal, if you're in a field where you're trying to take the next step, put all your thoughts down and what's your vision? How would you want to run things if you were in charge?
That's great. So we have a question coming in from Jeff, class of 2002. So what can you share about time and task management that has helped you be successful?
Well, I think, in any job you get a feel for, what's needed at what time. And you have to build your priorities. For us, the priorities are the players. You come into practice every day. You have a practice plan. You organize the practice, but you also make sure you set aside time to spend with the players that you're coaching. For me as a head coach, I have media obligations. I have maybe sponsorship meetings with key sponsors where I have to maybe say a few words. So it's just about sort of making sure I'm setting preferences and then setting my schedule accordingly. But it's something I really enjoy, every aspect of this job, and so I look forward to it every day.
That's great. That's awesome. Okay, how about if you, obviously motivating your team is a big part of what you have to do as the head coach. What techniques do you use to motivate your team?
Well, I think, motivating a team it's not the Newt Rockne speech. It's not the rah-rah stuff. Especially in the NBA, you play 82 games. You might have one of those speeches every once in a while. But it's really motivating a group is more about establishing the vision and getting the team to understand what would be so great about winning and playing a style and having success, because that's really ultimately what brings joy to the group. There's a lot of individual success that can happen in professional sports, and you can't discount that. Every player wants to win awards and make a lot of money, but there's nothing like being in a team sport and winning at the highest level, the joy that comes with that. So to me, motivating the group is about getting them to understand that if everybody plays a role and we commit to this style of play, we're going to have fun. We're going to have a great time. And with that joy will come satisfaction. And so the motivation is more sort of, it's a bigger picture than just, hey, fire up the troops, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and you're working with individuals that all share that passion, I would guess. So
yeah,
having a team that
most NBA players really are already pretty motivated, or they wouldn't have gotten this far.
Right.
It's not about motivating them to play hard as much as it is to motivate them to play within this vision that we have for them and that they should have for each other.
And so with that in mind, my guess is there could be times when not everyone is on the same page. So how do you deal with conflict?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question because this is a high stress business. Players, I think the players all understand that while they have this dream job and they are lucky to be in this position, they also have plenty of stress. You can get cut or traded anytime. You can get injured. You can be booed by the fans. There's stress that goes along with it. And so sometimes you have conflict. Maybe a player wants to play more and is upset about playing time. Maybe he's playing poorly. Things aren't going well for him, and he thinks that he should be in a different position. Playing more or playing with a different group of players. So there's so many different little things that can come into play that the only way to deal with that is constant communication. And, I've certainly made my share of mistakes the last couple of years as a coach. And one of those was last year. One player on the team was upset, and I could kind of see it, but he wasn't really saying anything. And I needed to nip that in the bud and go talk to him and communicate every day. I probably waited a little too long. So I think constant communication is critical, and it's up to the leader to initiate the conversation, because a lot of times the players are going to be quiet and they're going to just internalize things and internalize that stress. And it's up to me and our coaching staff to sort of diffuse that before it even happens.
That's actually a great point, that as the leader, it's up to you to address it, not to wait for someone else to bring it up. We have a question coming from Kumar, class of '89. This one is managing strong personalities. How do you keep them all focused on your coaching vision?
Well, the beauty of team sports and any environment where you've got a lot of people working together is that everybody is different. Every human being is different. Everyone grew up in a different environment, grew up with different influences. So I think it's critical to put yourself in someone else's shoes constantly and try to understand their point of view. And so, yeah, we've got strong personalities, but it's up to me as a coach, just as it would be up to anybody leading a group of people, a teacher, a business leader, whatever. You got to get to know people. You have to know, okay, we've got this guy who's a strong personality. How am I going to handle him? We've got this person who's maybe quiet and he's not going to reveal much with his facial expressions. And yet maybe there's a lot underneath there. So getting to know people is really the key to coaching. It's not so much, how many different plays I can draw up. That's not really rocket science. There's plenty of people who can draw up a good play or talk about how to play defense in this way or that way. It's what coaching is really about is relationships and getting to know people to the point where you understand their nuances and their flaws and their strengths, and you try to do everything you can to bring the best out of them.
That's great. So I have another question here from an alum who's asking about one of your favorite books, which is The Inner Game of Tennis. Do you have a favorite idea from that book that you could share?
Well, it's a great book. I started reading it when I was playing in the NBA. It has nothing to do with tennis. It just uses tennis as the medium for how we learn as human beings. And the premise of the book is that we have sort of two selves. We have the person we are, and then we have the person who's talking to ourselves. And the first example that Timothy Galway, the author, uses, he says he was observing a tennis match at one point in his life, and there was a player out there who was talking to himself. He'd hit a bad shot, and he'd say, "What are you doing?" And the author sat there for a second and thought, who's talking to whom? It's the same person. He's talking to himself, but does that mean there are two selves? And it hit home with me because, I was very hard on myself as a player, and I remember talking to myself. And the whole idea of the book is how can we unify our body and our mind? And how can we get to that point where we're not being so judgmental of ourselves and we're just allowing our bodies to play and to compete and to perform without thought. And it actually, the whole book offers all kinds of ideas for how to do so. It's I think in many ways, it's like the holy grail of the athlete. How do you compete and get out of your own way? And this book helped me do so. And I recommend it to anybody who has that sort of conflict within when they're trying to accomplish something and they're getting in the way of themselves.
That's great. Another question, this one comes from Jesus via Twitter. How much of your success do you attribute to, let me see, my person holding the question had to pull it up a little bit. How much of your success do you attribute to preparation, luck, or something else?
I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out, but it's a combination of preparation and luck. But of course, there is a great quote, which is that luck favors the prepared man. It's true. The more you prepare, the better chance you have to get lucky. But there are circumstances in life that we can't account for. So, what can we account for? We can account for how prepared we are, how hard we work, how passionate we are about what we do, how committed we are. And I've always been a believer in karma. I think if you prepare yourself and you work hard, I think you're more likely to get a break. But I absolutely understand that there's some strange forces and unforeseen things that happen in life, and you have to roll with them and keep moving forward no matter what happens.
So, having reached the level of success you have as a leader, has it provided you a platform to address other issues that are important to you?
Yeah, it has, and it's interesting as a member of the sports world, somebody in the limelight. I wrestle with that sometimes. I'm a basketball coach. I'm not a social activist, so I'm not a specialist on a lot of these things. And yet, when you have a voice, I think it's important to speak your mind if the forum is right, if the message is clear. And so, obviously, these days, that's a very pertinent topic. There's been a lot of social activism within the world of sports of late, and I have spoken out about certain things during my time as a coach, and yeah, it's an interesting subject, and one that is really dominating the airwaves these days.
Well, thank you. It's very interesting, and it is, I'm sure, a challenge to decide when and when not, to speak up. So let's talk a little bit about your basketball career and your experience as a coach. We've got a few more questions coming in here as well, but here's one from Corey, who's wondering, how do you kill time when you're on the road so much?
It's a good question. Greg Popovich once asked me in the last couple of years, he said, what do you do between practice and the game? I mean, it's the biggest waste of time. We finish practice at 11 or noon. We usually practice for an hour on a game day. And you're done at noon and the game's not till 7. He said, what do we do with ourselves during that time? And we kind of laughed. And yeah, everybody sort of has their own habits and routines. And for me, it's finding a good book, just to immerse myself in a book while I'm on the road, on the airplane, maybe watch a movie. We have a space on our plane where all the coaches are seated together and we listen to music and swap stories and have a lot of fun, make fun of each other. The camaraderie on the road is a lot of fun. It's a big part of team sports that everybody who's played on a team understands. And so there's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of downtime, and you've got to fill it with some hobbies or some habits, and that's what we all try to do.
Oh, that's great. What about, from Jane, work-life balance? How do you manage to keep work-life balance in your career?
Well, I think it's pretty easy. I mean, for me, I think I've always had a pretty good perspective. My family is, frankly, way more important than my job. And I encourage all of our players to feel the same way, to take care of themselves and their families first and foremost. But that doesn't preclude anybody from working hard and being passionate about their work. But that balance is important to overall general health and well-being. And I know that as a staff, as a coach, I don't want my players in the gym all day long. They need rest just as much as they need work. And so we work hard when we're here, and then we encourage guys to get out and go do something fun and go spend time with their families and balance their lives out as best they can.
Well, we have another question coming in from Phoebe Chalk. I think the next one is from Phoebe, and I think you know Phoebe.
I know Phoebe.
From athletics. And she's asking, how do you coach or work with millennials in particular on the court or in the back office?
Well, yeah, it's I make fun of the fact that our guys are millennials. That's how how I work with them. Life is different for in this generation for all of us. I have my cell phone with me all day. I'm constantly looking down at it. I'm looking at, Twitter. I'm looking at my email, looking at my texts. So it's not like, millennials are a different generation. I think that to me, this generation is growing up with all this different technology, but the rest of us are, getting older with that technology and learning new ways of life. And so it's all kind of connected, but I just make fun of our players. If they lose focus, I call them millennials and, ask them if they need to, send a tweet out before the next drill and practice, or, we just kind of have fun with it, and our players laugh and we all sort of enjoy the banter.
So it sounds like a sense of humor is as important as a basketball skill on your team, which is great. Okay, here's one from Alex. Pop talks about appropriate fear. Does this apply to your coaching?
Yeah, I always love that term. And Popovich used it. The first time I ever heard it was near the end of my career, I think maybe 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. And we were on the road and playing against a team that was not very good. And he said, we need to have appropriate fear tonight, meaning we can't just come in here and expect to win. But appropriate is the key word in there. You don't want to ever be fearful in competition. So appropriate fear, respecting the opponent, respecting the process of what you go through as a team and as a coach and as a player, being able to recognize that you got to go in with your antenna up. You got to be prepared. You got to be ready. And it's easy in an 82 game season, especially if you're on a really good team, to kind of lose focus and to maybe take a team lightly. So appropriate fear is a term that we use here occasionally, and we try to keep our guys alert and ready for everybody.
That's great. So here's a question and a comment from UA alum Robert, who I think probably speaks for a lot of us when he says he sees you as an individual that is exceptional, both personally and professionally. If a young graduate from the U of A asked you, what does it take to become exceptional at one's profession? What are a few things you would say?
Well, first of all, I'd want to thank Robert for that nice comment. I appreciate that. I have been extremely fortunate in my career to achieve a lot of success. I've played with great players who, you mentioned all those championships that I was part of. I wouldn't have been part of any championships if I didn't play with Michael Jordan and Tim Duncan and Scottie Pippen and Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. I mean, I've been really blessed to be around wonderful people. And so I don't know that I can say anything about being exceptional, but I do know that being part of a group and really appreciating the group and trying to be as successful as possible while trying to maintain the humility that's important in a group setting, especially. Those are really key things for me in my own life, my own existence. I want our players to reflect that too. We want to be hardworking, and we want to have fun and joy and passion, but we want to be humble because we know that life can change pretty dramatically very quickly on all of us.
So you mentioned Michael Jordan. We have a question from Paul, who would like to know what you learned from playing with Michael Jordan.
Well, I learned that he was way better than the rest of us. It was a thrill every night to go out and either play against him earlier in my career or play with him later on. But he was an incredibly hardworking player, incredibly gifted. I mean, he really had sort of every attribute that you would want, and that's why he's the greatest player of all time. But he's such a unique talent and a unique individual. Very few people out there will ever be able to come close to matching what he did. But I was just incredibly lucky to be his teammate for many years and to win championships mostly because of him. And it was a thrill to be by his side.
Oh, that's great. So here's Kevin, who's a 2008 econ grad. He's always wanted a career in sports. From your career as an executive, what would you recommend is the best way to enter the industry?
Well, I had a pretty unfair advantage, getting into the industry because I was playing. I already had contacts all over the NBA, friends, acquaintances. It's a much different story when you're not in the sports world to start with. So it's really about making contacts and doing as much as you can to get into that world. I'll tell a quick story. One of my key assistant coaches here in Golden State is a young guy who I hired in Phoenix when I was a general manager, and he was an intern that I hired as I think he was just out of college. I had a stack of 100 applications on my desk for this internship, and I didn't know what to do with them. You don't know, you can't put the face to the name. And then all of a sudden I came across his application, and it was a young man who I had seen at various NBA events, scouting combines and summer leagues. He had applied to be an intern with the NBA on several occasions, and by making those inroads as a young guy, he allowed me to put his face to his name. And I didn't know him very well, but I knew he was just incredibly productive and polite and fun to be around, just from being around him a little bit at these events. And so he stood out. And the reason he stood out and the reason I hired him is because he had gone out of his way to make himself available at these NBA events and start to build contacts, start to get to know people. That's the only way to do it.
Hard work, it sounds like. Hard work and being humble enough to do the job that nobody else wants to do. How important is work ethic and understanding that you may not land the perfect job the first time out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it is being willing to put in the work and put in the time and really getting the ball rolling without maybe being able to see the finish line and see where it's all going to lead you. You have to start somewhere. You've got to work. And a big part of hard work is working with people too. I think that's really critical. I've known a lot of really smart, bright people who, frankly, I didn't hire because maybe they didn't work as well in a group setting. But the sports world, like a lot of areas of business, education, it really is about working well with others and being part of a team. And those are things that people need to learn how to do. And I think you get a head start when you play on a team because you can't succeed without being a good teammate in many cases. So I think, but being a good teammate, being somebody who's easy to work with is really important.
That's great. We have another one coming in here from a current student at the U of A. This is from Bo. What should a student get involved with at the university to fulfill their dream of becoming a head coach one day?
It's a good question. I think getting your degree in anything is going to help you. I mean, not only just having the diploma, but the work that goes along with it. And almost doesn't even matter what you study. It's the discipline. It's the academic pursuit that leads to the next step, whatever that is. So if it is coaching, if you're studying education, if you're studying sociology, if you're studying phys ed, like I said, it almost doesn't matter because you're learning about the world. You're learning about how to deal with people, how to treat people. So it's how to get to the next point, the next step. That's all individual work. As I said, putting yourself out there, volunteering, meeting people, making connections. But it all starts with the education process in college.
Great. All right, we have another question. This one comes from Selena, class of 11. What advice do you have for women entering the sports field?
That's a good question. I think the women's sports have been growing and growing over the last few decades, especially. And so there are a lot of opportunities. It's more difficult to enter men's sports as a woman, but it's not impossible. And it's really no different than the things I just talked about. The willingness to get out into the world put yourself into uncomfortable situations, get to know people, volunteer, start to build your resume. And it's, this world is all about, who you know, and taking that next step through a connection, but preparing yourself for that next step, educating yourself, giving yourself as much experience as you can before you start to go places. But it's putting yourself out there, it's working hard and making contacts. And I hope that's a decent answer. I know there's some basic stuff in there, but it really is true.
It really works. Okay, I think we have one more. Here comes one regarding preparation. How did you prepare for your role as GM with the Phoenix Suns? And do you have advice for Wildcats who want to be executives?
Well, I went directly into the TV world after I retired from playing. And I did that for 4 years before becoming a general manager. And I prepared by really studying the league as a broadcaster, getting to know more about the league than I did as a player, the details of business, the salary cap, the relationships that are involved as a general manager versus as a player. I studied all those things. I asked a lot of questions, and I had a head start, obviously, because playing all those years really gave me some insight into how front offices worked. And so it's, it sort of goes back to the same principles that whether you're going into coaching or business or education, it doesn't matter what you're going into. It's about preparing yourself through learning about the field and then making as many contacts through volunteering, through internships. But you've got to get the ball rolling somehow, and you got to start meeting people.
So this is my question, putting in a pitch for the Alumni Association. You've been remarkable in your remaining connected to the institution and the university. How important is it for you that you have this continued connection, link back to the U of A? And why? Why do you do it?
Well, it's important because without my experience at the U of A, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't be the coach of the Golden State Warriors. I would not have played in the NBA. I wouldn't have carved out this path, this wonderful life that I've been able to live without my experiences at the school, at the University of Arizona. So I feel obligated to help people as much as I can, whether it's financially or just visiting with people and trying to help them get started. But I will forever feel a connection to my school, and always feel strongly about giving back however I can.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we're very grateful. We have a couple more questions. They're still coming in. Here's one from Susan, class of '09. Off the court, on the business side, what catches your eye in young talent? How do you spot potential?
I really look for interpersonal skills more than anything. In my position, when I'm looking to hire somebody, pretty much anybody is going to be pretty qualified. People don't apply for a job with me as a coach or as an intern or as a member of our front office without a pretty good wealth of information. So what I really look for is who do I want to be around every day? What's their personality like? And everybody's different. We all have friends from different backgrounds. We all are very different ourselves. For me personally, I like people who are funny. I like people who are good teammates. I like people who have big aspirations, but for the team, and big aspirations to be part of a team, more so than personal gratification. It only works in basketball if everybody's working together. And so I search for people who I want to be around every day and who are fun to be around and hardworking, but get it, for lack of a better phrase. I like people who get it. And what I mean by that is they've got a good work-life balance. They want to be part of the team, and they enjoy their work.
That's great. So here's a question from Lexi, class of '91. And she says, I lost my parents as a teenager at the U of A in 1987 and 88. You were an inspiration for obvious reasons. What advice do you have on moving forward in the face of tragedy or such adversity?
Well, thank you, Lexi, for the comment. I lost my dad when I was a freshman at U of A. There's no playbook for how to deal with that, and everybody eventually deals with loss and tragedy in their life. It's part of the process, part of being a human being. There's the only thing that I could offer is to lean on your family and friends, and lean on the people you love, and keep moving. You keep moving every day, and things get a little better. And it's been a long time since my father passed away. I still think of him every day. But my siblings, my mom and I, we've all been able to live successful, happy lives. And I think in many cases, for many reasons, it's because we've stuck together and just kept moving forward.
Thank you. So I think we have another question coming in. Let's see. Is it coming up? Yes, here it comes. She's writing very fast. All right, here comes from Jeff, class of '02. So he just moved to the Bay Area, and he says, please come to an alumni event. There's another one of our Baycats putting in a plug for one of their events. I know you've been very supportive of our alumni in the Northern California, so we're very thankful for that. And I know that they support you as well, that they've been to several Golden State games. So we thank you for that. So let me ask this is kind of on the sillier side, but do you have some favorite U of A item in your wardrobe, or is there something in particular that you couldn't live without from the U of A?
I've got all kinds of U of A gear. Sean Miller's been great ever since he's been the coach at U of A. He's been really good about keeping the connection with former players, and we'll get an updated T-shirt or pair of shorts, pair of sweats. I tend to wear a pair of sweats that Sean sent me a few years ago. They're kind of my Linus's blanket type thing. They're the most comfortable sweats I have. They're navy. They got the block A on them, and it's something I wear usually on the road. And then we for a while here we called ourselves the Golden State Wildcats because we have so many U of A.
Yes, we know.
People,
we did the same thing here. We called you the Golden State Wildcats. Yeah. And so how is that, playing with so many other Wildcats, having so many other Wildcats around you?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, Andre Iguodala is obviously a guy who made a huge impact at the U of A. Bruce Frazier was my college teammate. He's now on our coaching staff. We've had a lot of people who have been a part of the U of A program come through here. Assistant coach, other coaches, other players have come to camp and tried out, and we just feel a really strong bond, and we always will.
That's great. So I know we've talked a lot about your basketball experience. We have a question from Sean asking about your academic experience. Do you feel like that shaped and influenced your career?
Sure. Yeah. I started out as a creative writing major. I love to write. I ended up having 3 minors instead of a major, English, history, and sociology. I basically just took classes that I enjoyed. I knew I was going to get into basketball, so I didn't have to, worry about focusing on a career path with my classes. I just took classes that I enjoyed. But the writing, I think, really helped me more than anything. I write an awful lot. As a coach, I write notes to our players. I write letters to our fans. I answer a ton of emails. And I think, those are sort of technical examples of, my education helping me out. But more than anything, I just think the college experience shapes so many people. It doesn't even matter what you study. Some people go into a specific field and obviously have a specific goal in mind when they go to college. But I think there's a lot of people like me who don't, really have a specific major that's going to lead into anything. It's the college experience itself. It's getting your degree. It's getting to know people. It's having a wonderful atmosphere for 4 years of learning and having fun and enjoying yourself and kind of figuring out where it's all going to take you.
That's great. And it is that. So here's a question. We're talked a little bit about UA basketball today. So do you still have a good relationship with the team? You stay in touch with Sean Miller, obviously. Are you any forecast for the season? Anything about this year's group?
This is probably the first time ever since I left the school long time ago, 1988. What is that, 28 years ago? Oh my God. But this is the first time where I really don't know that much about the team. It's a very young team. I saw on Twitter the other day a picture of the whole group. I follow Arizona basketball on Twitter, and there was a team picture, and I only recognized about 5 faces, and I realized I got to start doing my homework. But to really, over this entire time since I left school, I've enjoyed following the team. I've gotten to know every team, whether it's coming back to Tucson for an event or just watching them on TV. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know this group. A lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomores, a lot of talent. But there's a lot of turnover these days, with so many of these teams. And it's different from the old days where you sort of got to know a player over 4 or 5 years. And now it's sort of, in a lot of cases, 1 or 2 years, and then they're gone and a new team is coming in. So I'm looking forward to getting to know this team.
That's great. So are we. You have an amazing attitude. It seems like you never have a bad day. So here's Brett asking, what is your secret to always maintaining a positive attitude?
Boy, I have no idea. I think I was blessed to grow up in a good family, to grow up with passion for life and for what I do. I love the work that I do now. I love my family, and I've got a great wife who I met at U of A, and 3 children who are now all in college or moved on. And so the empty nest is here, but I've been blessed. I've had an amazing life, and I have been very, very happy in my life. And I can't explain it other than I've been very fortunate in many ways.
So if you took basketball out of the picture, what would be your next favorite career?
That's an excellent question. I think I would be a teacher. I come from a family of teachers, and I would probably be involved in education at some level, but please don't take basketball away from me.
No, that's great. Definitely, it's your passion. I think, do we have another question coming up? I think we have one more. This is a good one. What would you do if you had 1 extra hour a week or day in the week?
1 extra day in the week.
I'd
probably do what I do every other day. Honestly, I think maybe there's a conception or a perception, I should say, that, as a basketball coach, I'm in the office for, 24 hours, spending the night on a cot in here and have no life. It's not true. We work hard, but we don't overdo it. I get time with my family, with my wife, with my friends. We do a lot of fun stuff. Even during the season, we'll go out to fun dinners or go to a concert or go to a movie. And I don't need any extra time for anything that I don't do already.
Wow, that's great. Here comes one more. Let's see, we've got a question coming in, and I know we're nearing our hour, so if there are any last minute questions, you should get them in right away. This is an interesting one for you to ponder. How would Arizona basketball be different today without the '88 season?
Without the '88 season, it's a good question. I think in many ways that team laid the groundwork, but I think the program would have taken off anyway. Lute Olson was such a dynamic coach and such a great builder that they would have made the Final Four before too long anyway, and that would have carried forward. But I do think that team was obviously the first to get to the Final Four, but I think it started the ball rolling nationally. We started getting more national recruits after that point. And that was a huge factor in the growth of the program during the 90s. And I think we're all very proud of that, but at the same time, it would have happened anyway.
Well, as one who was here in '88, I can tell you it was a very special time. It was basketball, but it was also such a source of community pride, and we were all so proud of the players and Lute Olson. So it was a great moment.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're about out of time. With one more. Can you share one final takeaway piece of advice from your career and mentors for all of us Wildcats?
The common thread with all my mentors is they've all been really passionate about what they do. So my mentors have all been basketball coaches for the most part, but even people that I meet who I'm inspired by, there's a passion about what they do that leads to the work ethic, the joy that comes from working at it, the joy that comes from the process. It's an easy cliche to say, follow your passion. Some people don't know what their passion is right away. I was fortunate enough to just sort of have that passion built in, but I think part of it is going out and not being afraid to try different things, different careers, different jobs, and not being discouraged if at first you're not feeling that fire and that energy and that passion. I know lots of people who have tried a lot of different things, walked down the path of life not knowing what was next, and almost stumbled into something they became very passionate about. And I think that's really important, is not to, if you're lucky enough to be able to have a job where you can pay the bills and feed yourself, feed your family, because a lot of people in the world are not able to do that, and I'm well aware of that. But if you're lucky enough to do that, and you have options and you have choices, I think it's good to experiment, try different things until you really find something that you love, because if you do that, everything seems to sort of happen on its own. You don't even need to feel like you're working. You're doing something that you love, and expands your horizons, and it takes you places you never would have dreamt of.
Wonderful. That's a great place to end it. I want to thank you very much for joining us. I think we all feel like we got to know you a little bit and understand a little bit more about what makes you tick. So thank you for spending the hour with us. I want to thank all of our viewers, alumni, students, friends for being part of our Cats in the Corner office today. And bear down.
All right, bear down. Thanks, Melinda.